In 1769, Captain James Cook watched a Polynesian navigator guide a canoe across 2,500 miles of open Pacific without a single instrument, no compass, no sextant, no charts. The Wayfinder read the ocean, the way starlight bent at the horizon, the way swells refracted off islands still hundreds of miles away. He didn't calculate his position, he felt it. Cook was baffled. How do they do it? He wrote in his journal. The answer, it turns out, is the same answer to an entirely different question. One asked by scientists working on regenerating human tissue, and by engineers trying to understand why ChatGPT works. The answer has to do with maps, and how the mind itself might be nothing more than a mapped mechanism. Here's what I mean. Today, right now, there are 425 new artificial intelligence papers published on arXiv. GPT-4 has 1.7 trillion parameters. The human brain has 86 billion neurons. But here's the strange part. A single-celled organism has 0 neurons, no brain, no nervous system, and yet it can learn, it can remember, it can make decisions. Michael Levin's lab at Tufts has spent decades showing that even cells, individual cells, demonstrate something that looks a lot like intelligence. So here's the question we need to answer. What do all of these systems have in common? A trillion parameter AI, an 86 billion neuron brain, a brainless cell. This week, a new paper proposes an answer, and it's not what you'd expect. The paper, published by Benedict Hartl, Leo Pio-Lopez, Chris Fields, and the legendary biologist Michael Levin, proposes a substrate-independent theory of cognition. In plain terms, a theory that explains thinking, regardless of whether you're made of neurons, silicon, or single cells. And it comes down to two processes. Just two. The first is remapping, creating an internal representation, a map, of the problem you're trying to solve. Not a picture of the world, a navigable model of the relevant problem space. The second is navigation, moving through that map toward a goal by constantly correcting your course, minimizing the error between where you are and where you need to be. That's it. A Polynesian wayfinder remaps the Pacific Ocean into an internal model of swells, stars, and wind patterns. Then he navigates it. A cell remaps its molecular environment into a kind of physiological map. Then it navigates towards stability. This is similar to how GPT remaps language into a high-dimensional embedding space, where similar meanings cluster close together. Then it navigates toward the most likely next token. Same mechanism, different substrate. But if we look at the 1990s, we see that Michael Levin actually started asking a question that most biologists ignored. When a salamander regrows a severed leg, how does it know what shape to build? The genome contains instructions for proteins, but it doesn't contain a blueprint of a leg. So how does the body know where the fingers go? How does it know when it's done? Levin discovered that cells communicate electrically, not just chemically, electrically. And they use this electrical signaling to build what he calls a bioelectric map of the target anatomy. In other words, the body has an internal model of its own ideal form. When you cut off a leg, the cells don't rebuild from scratch. They navigate back to a stored pattern. The limb isn't grown. It's remembered. Now let's talk about the other side, artificial intelligence. In 2017, Google published a paper called "Attention is All You Need." It introduced the transformer architecture, the foundation of GPT, Claude, Gemini, and every major language model since. What does a transformer actually do? It takes words and remaps them into something called embeddings, numerical representations in a high-dimensional space. In this space, words with similar meanings are close together. King and queen are neighbors. Paris and France are neighbors. But here's what's remarkable. Recent mathematical analysis has shown that the self-attention mechanism in transformers is equivalent to something called a Hopfield network. A Hopfield network is a kind of associative memory. You give it a noisy or partial input, and it retrieves the closest stored pattern. It finds what you're looking for by navigating toward a memory. In other words, AI isn't computing answers. It's remembering patterns. This is the insight at the heart of the paper. Cognition is not about brains. It's not about silicon. It's not about neurons or parameters. It's about two things: building a map and navigating it. A cell builds a map of possible molecular states and navigates toward homeostasis. Your visual cortex builds a map of possible objects and navigates toward recognition. GPT builds a map of possible sentences and navigates toward coherence. And they all do this the same way. They figure out where they are, identify where they want to be, and minimize the error between the two. William James, the psychologist, defined intelligence in 1890 as a fixed goal with variable means of achieving it. A century and a half later, we're discovering he was exactly right, and that his definition applies to systems he never could have imagined. Remember the Polynesian Wayfinders? When European explorers asked them to draw their maps on paper, they couldn't. The swells, the stars, the way the light bends at the horizon, none of it could be captured in ink. Because for them, the map wasn't a thing they had. The map was a thing they were. Their minds weren't using a map. Their minds were the map, a continuously updated internal model of the Pacific, navigated by feel. And now, 3 centuries later, we're discovering the same is true of a salamander regenerating a limb, of a developing embryo organizing itself into a body, of a language model predicting the next word. The map is not separate from the mind. The map is what the mind is. So what does this mean for us? For AI, it suggests that alignment isn't about constraining a model's behavior. It's about building shared maps. If cognition is navigation, then safe AI means ensuring we're navigating toward the same goals. The authors call this co-remapping, a collaborative process, not a one-sided restriction. For biology, it reframes regenerative medicine. If the body navigates toward a remembered pattern, then healing isn't about forcing cells to rebuild. It's about reminding them where to go. And for our understanding of intelligence itself, it suggests that what makes something smart was never about the substrate. Not brains, not computers. It's about the capacity to create representations of problems and to move through them toward a solution. The Polynesians knew this. Cells know this. And now our AIs are learning it too. The map is not just how we find our way. The map is the mind itself. And we're only just beginning to understand what that means. It's an incredible time to be alive and experiencing this evolution in our seeing how our understanding of our internal systems drives how we map the external tools we use that are changing the way we interact in the world.